A 100th birthday is a big deal. We can all agree about that. But not all 100th birthdays are the same.
Hello and welcome to Kentucky Wide, a podcast production of the Fraser Kentucky History Museum. I'm Mick Sullivan.
And I'm Sarah Jemerson. We are your co-hosts today as we meet Dr. Christopher Columbus Graham.
Dr. Graham was a man whose life coincided with the first century of Kentucky. His birthday was notable for many reasons, not least of which were the people he knew, the things he saw, and the artifacts he collected.
Some would call him Kentucky's own Indiana Jones.
So maybe like Kentuckiana Jones?
Well, maybe. Let's just get started. Picture a banquet hall at the Louisville Hotel. It's October 10th, 1884. 100 of Kentucky's most prominent citizens have gathered around a long table. They have come to celebrate a birthday. Not a 50th birthday, not a 75th, but a 100th birthday. The guest of honor is Dr. Christopher Columbus Graham, a man whose memory of both the city of Louisville and the state of Kentucky has no rival. The menu is deliberately old-fashioned. Guests dine on baked opossum with sweet potatoes, broiled squirrel, barbecued lamb, roast duck, roast turkey, leg of bear, corn dodgers, hoe cakes, pumpkin pie, and old bourbon. The event is designed as a pioneer feast, a celebration of a man who had lived nearly the entire history of Kentucky itself. The Louisville Courier-Journal would call it one of the most remarkable events in the history of Louisville. The newspaper went even further, declaring that the gathering was the most noteworthy that ever assembled in Kentucky. Why would an entire state celebrate him? And why did people describe him as living Kentucky history? Today, we're exploring the life of a man who may be the closest thing Kentucky ever had to Indiana Jones. Who was this man? A physician, a soldier, a businessman, a historian, a fossil hunter, a collector, a crack rifle shot, a friend of the Lincoln family, a correspondent of Charles Darwin, and a witness to 100 years of American history. This is the story of Christopher Columbus Graham.
Christopher Columbus Graham was born on October 10, 1784 at Fort Worthington near Danville, Kentucky. That date is important. Kentucky would not become a state until 1792. Graham was born 8 years after the Declaration of Independence, and while the frontier still represented the edge of American civilization. And his parents were genuine Kentucky pioneers. His father, James Graham, and his mother, Mary Ann Worthington, first arrived in 1778 and settled at Corn Island at the Falls of the Ohio. James was a long hunter who fought during the violent frontier conflicts that defined early Kentucky. When he went west to Illinois early in the American Revolution with General George Rogers Clark, Mary Ann remained with the party at Corn Island. James participated in the Battle of Blue Licks in 1782, often called the last battle of the American Revolution. Captured by Native American warriors, James Graham was taken to Canada before eventually returning to Kentucky. And the names Daniel Boone and George Rogers Clark weren't distant historical figures in the Graham household. They were contemporaries. They were neighbors. They were part of the world young Christopher would grow up in.
And like many frontier boys, Christopher quickly developed a reputation as a marksman. People claimed he could outshoot nearly anyone. In fact, decades later, one author would describe him as the finest rifle shot in America. But shooting was only one of his talents. He possessed an insatiable curiosity, and that curiosity would define his life. While Graham was a voracious reader and worked as a silversmith, adventure was always calling. During his youth, he guided approximately 20 flatboats down the Mississippi River. Imagine the danger. These journeys covered hundreds of miles through largely unsettled territory. There were river hazards, disease, storms, and countless other risks. In December 1811, Graham found himself on a flatboat on his way to business in New Orleans. Near New Madrid, Missouri, the earth began to shake. The New Madrid earthquakes were among the most powerful in North American history, and the one Christopher witnessed firsthand is one of the most consequential and dramatic. Entire sections of land rose and fell. Forests collapsed. Witnesses reported the Mississippi River appearing to flow backward, and Christopher Columbus Graham was there to see it. For many people, surviving such an event would become the defining story of their lives. For Graham, it was merely another chapter. When the War of 1812 began, Graham joined the infantry.
The war proved dangerous. He was wounded, then captured, eventually exchanged, and captured again, this time at Fort Malden in Canada. Most soldiers would have considered a second capture terrible luck, but Graham escaped. And when he was discharged from the service in 1814, his adventures continued. He traveled to New Orleans and became a school teacher, but a malaria outbreak forced him to leave the city. Then came more military service. He fought during the Black Hawk War, serving alongside a young Jefferson Davis, who would become president of the Confederate States. Graham also participated in the Texas War for Independence. Already, before reaching middle age, he had accumulated enough experiences for several lifetimes, yet his most productive years still lay ahead.
Eventually, Graham attended Transylvania University in Lexington. There, he studied medicine under the famous surgeon, Dr. Benjamin Dudley. After graduation, Graham practiced medicine in Harrodsburg. He became one of Kentucky's earliest formally trained physicians. But medicine would not make him wealthy. Natural springs would. In the 1820s and 1830s, Americans flocked to mineral springs resorts, believing the waters possessed healing powers. Recognizing an opportunity, Graham acquired spring properties near Harrodsburg. The resort became known as Graham Springs. Soon it earned a reputation as the Saratoga of the South. Visitors arrived from across the nation. The resort transformed Graham into one of Kentucky's wealthiest men. But the story contains a difficult reality. Like many wealthy Kentuckians of the era, Graham's success depended heavily on enslaved labor. Census records show that dozens of enslaved people lived and worked on his properties. The springs, hotels, and businesses that brought him prosperity were built and maintained through a system of human bondage.
What makes Graham truly fascinating isn't merely what he accomplished, it was what captured his imagination. As he grew older, he became obsessed with collecting. Artifacts, minerals, fossils, Native American relics, historical documents, anything that might illuminate the past. He transformed this passion into what became known as the Free Museum of Kentucky. People across the state contributed specimens, and Graham searched tirelessly. One obituary observed that there was scarcely a home in central Kentucky that he had not visited in search of interesting objects. Imagine him, an elderly man carrying specimen bags and geological tools, knocking on farmhouse doors, examining unusual rocks, questioning landowners, searching for clues about Kentucky's ancient past. And he never stopped. At 93 years old, most people are content to rest, but not Christopher Columbus Graham. It was at age 93 when he organized an excavation at Big Bone Lick. Big Bone Lick was already famous. For more than a century, enormous fossil bones had emerged from the soil there, mastodons and mammoths and ancient bison. Graham hired 10 workers and spent a month excavating. The crew recovered barrels of fossils, mammoth teeth, mastodon remains, ancient animal bones. The 93-year-old doctor was still hunting for discoveries. His scientific interests eventually brought him into contact with one of the most famous thinkers in the world, Charles Darwin, the father of evolutionary theory.
In the late 1870s, Graham wrote to Darwin. He described his museum and his vast collection of fossils and minerals. He proudly explained that he had spent 70 years gathering specimens throughout the Americas. Most remarkably, Graham hoped to display a letter from Darwin in his museum and requested that Darwin only write on one side of the page. He wanted future generations to see evidence of scientific inquiry and discovery. Darwin would respond. Think about that for a moment. A frontier-born Kentuckian, a former flatboatman, a soldier of the War of 1812, corresponding with Charles Darwin. His life stretched across astonishing distances, both geographical and intellectual.
But there would be another famous connection in Graham's life: Abraham Lincoln. According to family recollections and historical accounts, Graham knew Lincoln's parents. He attended celebrations connected to their marriage, and years later, Graham claimed to have known the Lincoln family during Abraham's childhood. One family tradition even suggested that Graham took young Abraham along on collecting excursions, introducing him to geology, history, and the wider world beyond the frontier farm. Whether every detail can be verified, Graham's connection to the Lincoln family was well known. In later artistic depictions of Lincoln's Kentucky childhood, Christopher Columbus Graham appears as a traveling philosopher, sharing stories with the future president. And it's a fitting image. If anyone represented the larger world arriving on the frontier, it was Graham. By the 1880s, Graham had become a legend. People viewed him as the living bridge between generations. His parents were in the legendary Corn Island Party, and he remembered Kentucky before statehood. He remembered the frontier. He remembered Boone's era. He remembered Lincoln's childhood. He corresponded with Darwin. He had witnessed America transform from a fledgling republic into an industrial nation. During his singular lifetime, Louisville alone had seen so much development that it would have been unrecognizable from his earliest days. What had been a little muddy, far-flung town in his youth now had railroads, streetcars, light bulbs, steamboats, factories, cathedrals, synagogues, hotels, hospitals, libraries, colleges, museums, art galleries, aquariums, baseball parks, and even the Kentucky Derby at Churchill Downs.
So when he approached his 100th birthday, Kentuckians decided the occasion demanded celebration. 100 guests, 100 years, one extraordinary life. The invitation described the event as a pioneer dinner, and no empty seats were desired. Every chair represented a year of Graham's life. Guests were not simply honoring a man, they were honoring an era rapidly disappearing. The Courier-Journal devoted more than a page to the event. Its writers understood they were witnessing history. Only 4 months later, on February 3, 1885, Christopher Columbus Graham died. He was 100 years and 4 months old. The details of his final hours feel almost poetic. 2 hours before his death, he dictated a letter to Robert Lincoln, son of Abraham Lincoln, and then Secretary of War. No one knows what the letter contained. The family wished to keep it private, and so the contents have vanished into history. Perhaps that mystery is appropriate. Graham spent his entire life pursuing lost stories, searching for forgotten relics, preserving memories before they disappeared.
Years earlier, historian William B. Allen dedicated a history of Kentucky to Christopher Columbus Graham. He called him a living history of Kentucky, and it's hard to imagine a more fitting description. Christopher Columbus Graham lived long enough to become something rare. Not simply a witness to history, but a connection between eras. A human bridge stretching from Daniel Boone's Kentucky to the modern age. And perhaps that's why 100 men gathered in Louisville in 1884. They weren't merely celebrating a birthday, they were celebrating a century of Kentucky itself.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us for Kentucky Wide. This episode was written by Susan Reed, with production and music by Mick Sullivan. and editorial help from Simon Miners. Be sure to subscribe and share if you enjoy it. We'll be back in 2 weeks with the tale of an extinct flower, a plant-loving man from the 1800s, in Scientists Today. So stay tuned.
Kentucky Wide comes to you from the Fraser Kentucky History Museum, where our newest exhibit, I Too Am a Kentuckian, is now open. This beautiful exhibit opened on July 4th of 2026 and will be open for a full year, so come see it while you can. Additionally, we always keep a full calendar of public programs, educational events, out-of-school time camps for kids, and so much more, so stay in contact. And as always, we hope to see you here at our museum in beautiful, sunny, downtown Louisville, Kentucky.